Welcome. Welcome to our service from the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence. I'm Molly Hale, and I'm a member of the board, the Climate Action Group, and the COVID response team. It is wonderful to see you here this morning in the Great Hall and online. Thank you to everyone who is helping make this service happen this morning. If you are new or returning after time away, we're very glad you're here. Feel free to fill out a blue welcome card, which you can put in the offering plate later in the service. There's also an online version that you can find through the link in the chat. We'll put you on our email list so you can receive information about all our activities. We strive to be a congregation that welcomes people of all ages, races, religious beliefs, backgrounds, sexual orientations, gender identities, and abilities. We belong to the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, the UUA, and we are guided and inspired by its values and principles. Our values and principles move us to remember that we in Northampton inhabit unceded land of the Pecumtuck and Nipmuc peoples. They remind us to acknowledge our responsibility to face the legacies of dispossession and systemic racism that are part of our collective history, even as we also affirm and celebrate the legacies that inspire us. For families, classes are happening for crawling babies through 8th graders. Early childhood starts downstairs. Kindergartners through 4th graders start in the Great Hall and go downstairs together after the story. 5th through 8th graders are welcome to go downstairs today after the story or stay for the whole service. Fidget tools and drawing supplies are available at the back entrance for everyone. We're here to celebrate, to reflect, and to support one another in sustaining hope and upholding our values. If you are on Zoom, we ask that you please keep your videos off, except during the greeting. And if you're in the Great Hall, thank you for wearing a mask. And now we'll begin our service.
We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. Now I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join in saying the words to accompany the chalice lighting as Molly lights it for us this morning. We light our chalice as a beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for truth and meaning. We light our chalice as a beacon of love in celebration of the life we shared together.
Our story this morning is Sophie's squash, which is one of my favorites and apparently one of Janet's as well, and such a great reminder that with change brings new and wonderful things. This book is by Pat Zietlow Miller. One bright fall day, Sophie chose a squash at the farmer's market. Her parents planned to serve it for supper, but Sophie had other ideas. It was just the right size to hold in her arms, just the right size to bounce on her knee, just the right size to love. I'm glad we met, Sophie whispered. Good friends are hard to find. At home, Sophie used markers to give her squash a face. Then she wrapped it in a blanket and rocked it to sleep. When it was time to make supper, Sophie's mother looked at the squash. She looked at Sophie. I call her Bernice, Sophie said. I'll call for a pizza, said her mother. After that, Bernice went everywhere with Sophie, to story time at the library, to visit other squash at the farmer's market, to practice somersaults by the garden. Every night, Sophie gave Bernice a bottle, a hug, and a kiss. Well, we did hope she'd love her vegetables, Sophie's mother told her father. Shh, Sophie said. Bernice is sleeping. Sweet pea, Sophie's mother said one morning as they made blueberry waffles. Bernice is a squash, not a friend. If we don't eat her soon, she'll get mushy and gross. Let's bake her with marshmallows. Won't that taste yummy? Don't listen, Bernice, Sophie cried. That afternoon, Sophie's father took her shopping. Sugar beet, he said, Bernice is a squash. Why don't you pick a nice toy to play with instead? But the trucks were too hard and the dolls were too soft. Sophie clutched Bernice tightly. No thanks, she said. I have everything I need. I'm curious if anybody here has ever had something they loved that maybe wasn't a normal toy. After supper, Sophie's parents called a family meeting. Bernice napped in Sophie's lap. Why don't we donate Bernice to the food pantry before she rots, her father suggested. Sophie shook her head. Bernice will last forever. Bernice seems a little blotchy, said Sophie's dad on the way to the library one day. She looks perfect to me, Sophie replied. At story time, some kids pointed and stared. What's that spotty thing? A boy asked. Her name is Bernice, and she's a squash, Sophie said, with freckles. Maybe Bernice should stay home next time, Sophie's mom suggested. Why? Sophie asked. She wasn't the one being rude. Still, as winter neared, Sophie noticed changes. Bernice seemed softer, and her somersaults lacked their usual style. Visiting friends will cheer you up, Sophie said. At the farmer's market, squash were everywhere. Firm, shiny squash. What keeps a squash healthy? Sophie asked a farmer. It's simple, really, he said. Fresh air, good clean dirt, a little love. Well, thought Sophie, I have all that. At home, Sophie cleared leaves from Bernice's favorite spot. She made a bed of soft soil, tucked Bernice in, and kissed her goodnight. Get better soon, she whispered. That night, while Sophie slept, the wind whistled and tiny snowflakes fell. When she awoke, the world was covered in white. Do you think Bernice is cold out there? Sophie asked her mother. I'm sure she's warm and cozy under her snow blanket, her mother replied. Sophie gazed out the window all morning. She was still there in the afternoon when her father came home with a surprise. You need a new friend, he said. Meet Ace. Ace was nice, but boring. He just swam around and around in his bowl. But during the long winter, Sophie discovered that Ace was a superb silent reader who did fabulous flip turns, and he always listened politely when she talked about Bernice. Bernice was great at keeping secrets. I wonder if any of you've guessed what happens. When the snow finally melted, Sophie rushed to the garden. The only thing there was a small green sprout. It looked strangely familiar. Bernice, Sophie said, how was your winter? After that, Sophie, Ace, and Bernice ate lunch together every day. One bright summer morning, Sophie somersaulted across her yard, landed by the garden, and stared in disbelief. Bernice had grown 2 tiny squash. Wow, Sophie told them, you look just like your mom. Soon, Bonnie and Baxter were just the right size for Sophie to hold in her arms and bounce on her knee. Just the right size to love.
And now I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Open
40-something screens today, so lots of our friends are on Zoom. And Julie's going to turn on the gallery view so you can see people, and then say hello to someone nearby you as well. Good morning, everybody on Zoom. I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you. Hi, Claire. Hey, Alan. Sydney, Amy, Ann. Hey, Melissa from New Mexico. Good to see you. Mark and Abby, Ginny, Sherry, Kim, John and Gail, Georgia, Peggy, Judy. Hi, Kirby. Who else is there? Hi, Sally. We miss you. Good to see you here. Hi, Sarah. Oh, Nancy, good to see you. Paula, Wally, good to see you guys. Amy, Greg, hi Greg. Rich, Steve and Teresa, Beth and Bill. Hello, Alice Morshearer, good to see you. Joyce, Janet. All right. Alice, don't listen to this. And now it's time. We haven't done that in nearly 3 years. Now it's time for everyone who's going to religious education activities to leave us, and we will sing you out. Something else. All right, now I'm going to invite you to turn to the very beginning of your hymnal, which is the page before hymn number 1. Or you can just look up here, and together we're going to read from Article 2 of the Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws, better known to many of us as the principles and sources. Then we're going to read the sources, the principles together, and then I'll just read the sources. So I invite you to join me in reading this. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And then those principles are grounded in sources, which are direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. The words and deeds of prophetic women and men, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn against idolatries of the mind and spirit, and the spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. And then the final phrase of this section says, grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith, we're inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another our mutual trust and support. And now it's Kathy's turn.
This is the Social Justice Minute, which calls us to live our UU values. Every month between November and April, the USNF Youth Group prepares, they shop, cook, prepare, and serve a meal for the interfaith shelter. Your generous support is needed to be able to do this project. The cost of groceries for the shelter cooking range from $120 a month to $140 a month. The youth plan the meal. They budget and prepare hearty meals that include appetizers, main dishes, vegetables, and desserts, and beverages. So in order to help us, you can purchase gift cards after the service over here, which are generously we accept. Also, you can write a check in the memo line, well, to USNF and in the memo line Youth Group Shelter. And we want to thank everyone who's donated in the past week, because now we have enough for our shelter cooking in the next 2 weeks. So, thank you.
So every week we take an offering. Our offering is now shared equally between the congregation and the work of the congregation and organizations outside of our community whose work is consistent with our values and principles. You can donate online at any time. You can also put today a check or cash in the plate. And everything that we do, really, your generosity really does make a difference. And now our offering will be gratefully, generously given and gratefully received. For this morning's meditation, I'm sharing something written by Rabindranath Tagore, who always reminds me of our dear Shanat Majumdar, Flora's husband, who died 6 years ago last week. Tagore was one of his favorite poets. Today, the peace of autumn pervades the world. In the radiant noon, silent and motionless, the wide stillness rests like a tired bird. Today, the thin thread of the river flows without song, leaving no mark on its sandy banks. In the stillness, I hear in every blade of grass, in every speck of dust, in every part of my body, in the visible and invisible worlds, in the planets, the suns, the stars, I hear the joyous dance of the atoms through endless time. Let's take that into the silence together. Last June, I attended the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly in Portland, Oregon. General Assembly, also called GA, provides an opportunity for people from congregations all across the country to meet and exchange ideas, attend workshops, worship together, and also conduct the formal business of our association. My husband Booker came too. Our son Elliot now lives in Portland, and so we got to spend time with him, including a beautiful afternoon hiking on the Oregon coast. We played hooky. All of the business meetings and the worship services and nearly all of the workshops at last June's GA were offered both online and in person, and maybe a third of the delegates attended online rather than in person. And one very engaging topic was about revising the UUA bylaws, the legal document that governs how the organization functions. So seriously, the bylaws are really old and outdated, and they need work. But the engaging part is the revision of Article 2, which is where we find the principles and the sources. So it's probably not a coincidence that the theme for November is change, because the UU principles most of you know and love are changing. Article 2 is being rewritten. Now, when I said this at the board retreat yesterday, people went, "What?" Maybe that's what's happening inside of you. A 5-person group was appointed by the UUA board to draft the rewrite of Article 2. It includes Hope Johnson, who is the black woman who has been the force behind the principle to have congregations adopt an 8th principle. And that's the principle that says we covenant to dismantle racism and other forms of oppression in ourselves and in our institutions, and we do it in a way that makes us accountable for that work. So I'm going to read you part of what the board's charge to that group is. They said the new Article 2 should ask us to choose love in action as the path forward and to center love as a core value. The new principles should guide us in the transformation of ourselves, our communities, and our faith into active networks of collective care, restoration, and justice. Our commitment to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism is love in action and should be centered. Further, the Commission was charged with engaging the participation of UUs all across demographics, identities, and theological, philosophical beliefs. They were told they need to be open and transparent in their work, communicating progress frequently. The board would like to see an Article 2 that is inspirational, memorable, and poetic. And the Commission is free to revise, replace, or restructure the sections as needed. There is nothing sacred about the number of principles or sources, nor their specific wordings. So are you still breathing? Let's breathe. So these people have had a very hard job. They started about 15 months ago, maybe, because this charge came out after the GA of 2021. And they have done an incredible amount of work since last January. They've held information and feedback sessions. They've drafted and redrafted. They've solicited comments and suggestions. And during last June's General Assembly, they presented drafts of some of the sections. There were multiple opportunities to discuss them, both in person and then to give feedback online, which I did. And then they spent the summers reading and commenting. They read these comments. I don't know, there had to be thousands of comments, and revising and hosting more feedback sessions in September. What? They're changing the principles? That was our son Elliot's reaction last June when we told him about the commission's work and the session that we had just attended. He said, "Mom, the principles are what makes me a UU. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, the interdependent web. They can't change that." And I know he is not this makes me anxious to talk about this. He is not the only one with that reaction. There's actually a small but active splinter group of UU ministers and lay people across the country who believe that overarchingly the Unitarian Universalist Association is going in the wrong direction, and revising the principles and the rest of Article 2 means for them a further step away from what is their Unitarian Universalism. 2 of the people from that group had earned spots on the ballot for open UUA board seats, which is one of the things that gets voted on at General Assembly, open board seats. Just as we do in our annual meetings here, we appoint new people to the board that are nominated by a nominating committee. That is the way the UUA board works as well. But 2 people had earned seats by petition, and that's a process, according to our very old and dated bylaws, that requires just 50 signatures, no more than 10 from any one congregation. So you can run for a UUA board seat by getting 50 signatures from no fewer than 10 congregations. The board, in response, issued a statement explaining the nominating committee's role, that it's independent and that it has a vetting process. And they also said, the board recognizes that the 2 petitioning candidates are running in direct opposition to the UUA administration and board's approach to anti-racism and anti-oppression. I have a quote from Harold Wilson, who was the Labour Party Prime Minister for Great Britain in the 60s and for a few years in the 1970s. He said, "He who rejects change is the architect of decay. The only human institution which rejects progress is the cemetery." So we're going to sing, and then we'll see what it might mean to center the value of love and choose love in action as the path forward. Please join in singing hymn number, rise in body or spirit, and join in singing hymn number 129, Let Love Continue Long.
Say
So Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition that comes out of the Protestant, liberal, somewhat radical Protestant tradition, and it's a combination of the Universalists and the Unitarians, and that merger happened in the early 1960s. So when the two churches combined, the Unitarian and the Universalist churches combined in 1961, they struggled a little bit to define their values and purposes, because there was some differences. The Universalists were generally more in the mainstream Christian tradition than the Unitarians at that point. So how would you characterize a liberal religion that came out of the Judeo-Christian tradition and that includes humanists, atheists, practitioners of Eastern and earth-based traditions, Christians, Jews, and people who will not be categorized? Ours, which is many of us, a religion that has no creed, no formal belief system to which its members must adhere. How do you characterize it? So the original principles, what we know of now as the principles in the 1961 bylaws, were part of the section of the purpose of the association. Every set of bylaws for an organization you have somewhere in the beginning. The purpose of this organization is blah, blah, blah. And if you look at the society's bylaws, we have one of those statements, a purpose statement. So the purposes of the UU Association in 1961 were to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. You might hear some echoes here. To cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets of teachers and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. You can see a compromise there. To affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. Number 4 was to implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. And then to serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion. And 6, to encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. (1961). But as I said, you can hear some of the seeds of the current principles and sources. You can hear some of the words of the current principles and sources: the search for truth, the worth of every person, use of the democratic method, world community. And then there were several revisions beginning between 1963 and 1985. At some point, recognizing the gender bias in the original language, and eventually moving the principles into a section that was different from the association's purpose. And the last major revision, the principles that most of us know and love, and I would say 90% of the people in this congregation have only understood as Unitarian Universalists. There's a handful of you that were here before 1985, but we know who you are. The last major revision happened in 1985, and it was impelled by a movement led by UU women, by lay people. The principles and sources have changed in only very minor ways since then. So, as I said, the vast majority of us, and for our children, who, like our sons Elliot and Dan, grew up UU, those 7 principles are what we have understood as formative and foundational to Unitarian Universalism. And sometimes we almost treat them like they're a creed. So I don't know how we can relate a moldy squash named Beatrice. It's Jessica that loves that story. I think it's a great, but it's Jessica that loves that story. Named Beatrice, to Wilson's remarks about resistance to change or the 7 UU principles. To me, it's more like jazz, as Ellen was playing the interlude, Be Thou My Vision. It's something is shifting, and yet the tune is still there. Resistance, but you can think about inevitability and resistance to change and what can happen when we embrace it. So this is how it works. If accepted by the UUA board, the proposal for revisions will go to the General Assembly in 2023. And that will happen both online and in person. In person, it's in Pittsburgh. If passed, or I think if passed with minor revisions, it will again be voted on at the 2024 General Assembly before taking effect. You can see it is really hard to change these UUA bylaws. So I'm going to read you now from the current draft. And and Amanda's going to show it for us on the screen, the part that revises the principles and sources section. And you can follow along. This is section C 2.2, so it's not the purposes section. It says, values and covenant. Love is the enduring force that holds us together. As Unitarian Universalists in religious community, we covenant, congregation to congregation, and through our association, to support and assist each other in engaging our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom and reason, hope and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love inspires and powers the passion with which we embody our values. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are justice. We work to be a diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all people thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression within individuals and our institutions, and we are accountable to each other for this work. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely share our faith, presence, and resources. Compassionate generosity connects us to one another in relationships of mutuality. Evolution. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Evolution is fundamental to life and to our Unitarian Universalist heritages, never complete, never perfect. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, theology, and experience. We covenant to learn from one another and openly explore the depth and breadth of our many wisdoms. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain a fully inclusive and accessible community of communities. And finally, interdependence. We honor the sacred interdependent web of all existence. With humility, we understand our place in the web. We covenant to care for and respect the earth and all beings by fostering relationships of mutuality. And we work to repair the bonds we have broken. And then the next section says, as Unitarian Universalists, we draw upon and are inspired by the full depth and breadth of sacred understandings as experienced by humanity. Grateful for the religious lineages we inherit and the pluralism which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. So, it could be worse. Justice. generosity, evolution, pluralism, equity, and interdependence, all grounded in the enduring force of love. So what the commission suggested, if you go on their website, you can go on their website, you can look at the back of the order of meeting, I put the URL, you can just Google UUA Article 2, UUA Bylaws Article 2, and you'll find all this. But one of the things they suggest is, for the first time, read it. Notice how you feel. Read it again, and notice what you're thinking. Read it again before you start revising. My revisions are on the back here. Also, I think Dave is going to put the link to that section of the UUA website in the chat. So if you're online, you can find it in the chat. So anyone can give feedback. These people are really generous. Any one of us can give feedback. If you want to give feedback, you can give feedback. I don't think they have a form up yet. What they had at GA was a form that you could fill out. I don't think they have that yet, but you can, it should be there soon. So if you go to the website and you read it a few times and you work on your revisions, or just comments, and start with thank you. If you're going to comment, please start with thank you. And there are also feedback sessions you'll see there that are scheduled through November that anybody can attend. So if you want to go to a feedback session, and they're interesting because you talk to other UUs from all over the country, and they give you prompts. So the UU principles are going to change, and our Unitarian Universalist Association is governed democratically. So the delegates to GA in Pittsburgh and online next June can, if they choose, reject the revision. And if you're a member, you can be a delegate for this congregation, in person or online. So traditionally, we haven't had very many delegates from this congregation. I think this would be a great year to go. And it's maybe $200 and something to attend online. I don't remember exactly what. But you do have to, in order to be a delegate, you have to attend. And in order to be a delegate, you have to be a member. And I don't remember how many we get. Does anybody remember? Is Dave? No, Dave's online. It might be 5. We get, congregations are assigned a number of delegates based on their size. And we're kind of a smallish mid-sized congregation. So we have another innovation this morning, which is you have a colored mark on the back of your order of meeting. If you look, there's a little splotch at the top. If you would like to, we thought it might be a way for people to gather in groups if they want to have conversations, whether it's about this or just to mingle and randomly mix up in a way that will allow you to meet other people. So purple is here, blue is in the back, green is over here. Purples might want to migrate somewhere else, like up to the balcony or something, if that might make it a little easier. And then in the parlor, one side of the parlor has orange and one side of the parlor has red. And if you don't have a color, you can go wherever you want. Or you can still go wherever you want. UU Minister Rod Richards wrote this. He said, "We explicitly open ourselves to the possibility of change, even opening our principles and sources to the possibility of revision, because we know that no single formulation or understanding of our purpose will serve for all times and places. And our commitment to the burning core at the heart of our mission is to search out, call forth, nurture, and share more love, more justice, and more peace. That commitment does not change. The purpose, means far more than the proclamation. So may it be. Now, our final hymn is the hymn that was written to celebrate the merger, actually originally of the Universalist and Unitarian youth groups, and is now, was the song that they sang, the hymn that they sang at the celebration of the merger in 1961. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 145, As Tranquil Streams. Go forward in the power of love, and go in hope and in peace.